Hi guys, welcome back to Mysteries channel. Thank you so much for clicking on my channel, checking out the videos. I really do appreciate it. I was thinking about doing a little mini series on the war machine that continues to this very present day. It began in ancient times and it continues on. But then I thought, man, that's kind of depressing, right? Like, let's go something a little bit more upbeat for spring. So today's video is going to be about the opposite. It's going to be the only civilization throughout the history of civilizations that seems to have been completely war-free through the entirety of its run. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this video was because I just want us to remember that war is not the precursor to technology or innovation. And I only bring this up because you would be surprised at how many people actually believe this crap. You know what I mean? Not only that, but this kind of ties to a subject that is near and dear to my soul. That we as humanity were either in direct contact with one another, meaning that we were sailing around the world, trading goods and services and ideas with one another, or we were in indirect contact with one another, that maybe there was a culture or civilization that was doing that. Like a group of people were traveling around the world, trading goods and ideas with all of us as they did their thing. An example of a group like this could be the Phoenicians or even the Sabaeans. We talked about those in a past video, in the Box of El video. So I'm talking about a culture like that that was much earlier than the Phoenicians or the Sabaeans, at least I think. That being said, today we're going to talk about one of the 6 pristine civilizations of the world. What? What's that, essay? Yeah, let's go over it. First, what's a civilization? A civilization is often described as a complex culture with 5 characteristics: advanced cities, specialized workers, complex institutions, record keeping, and advanced technology. Okay, so what is a pristine civilization? A pristine civilization is a society that develops as a civilization independently without influence from others. Many times, pristine civilizations are called cradles of civilization. And until about 20 years ago, there were 5 pristine civilizations. Those were the Egyptians, the Mesopotamian, the Indus Valley, China, and Mexico. So, who was this 6th pristine civilization, you might ask? The civilization we're talking about is in fact the only civilization in history that we currently know of that is untouched by war. And it also happens to be the oldest, we'll get into that in a moment, independent civilization of the Americas that we know of. That is the Norte Chico or Caral Supe of Peru. Norte Chico is how you're going to find them described or written about in anything written in English. Caral Supe is what is used by the Spanish-speaking publications and the Peruvians. And this is the crap that drives me nuts. It's like in 1,000 years, someone's going to come across these written accounts about the Caral Supe and the Norte Chico, and they're going to think that these are 2 different civilizations when indeed everyone's talking about the same damn place. Why can't we just all agree to use whatever the Peruvians are using, since that's where they happen to be? So Caral Supe it is. Just know whenever I talk about the Caral Supe from here on out, that it may be the Norte Chico to you. Now, the Caral Supe were contemporary with the ancient Egyptians. At the same time that ancient Egypt was beginning to build pyramids, the Caral Supe were building pyramids. At the same time where agriculture was occurring in Sumer and Egypt, agriculture was occurring in Caral Supe. This ancient, pristine culture predates the Olmecs by more than 2 millennia. And you guys know that I'm suspicious of dates. Just want to throw that disclaimer out there. Right here. This is a Caral Supe city. The Caral Supe lived in the Peruvian valleys of 4 different rivers. They built cities much like this one around 3700 BCE. The oldest radiocarbon dating in the area dates to about 9210 BCE. But remember, guys, that's what we've found. And although work has been done on some of the places and locations, by and large, they are untouched. When archaeologists first found these Caral Supe cities, they dated them to about 900 BCE. And as more cities and more evidence was unearthed, the dates go back further and further. Currently, the date is around 3700 BCE for the building of large-scale city centers. Maybe in the next 50 to 100 years, it'll be even further back because we've done more and more excavating and we'll have a better idea of how long we've actually been here. Currently, there are 32 known Caral Supe cities, but some of them have been decimated by developers. There are likely many more of them out there, or were many more of them out there. Where this scraped piece of land is in this picture, there was once a large pyramid. The pyramid was thought to be about 4,000 years old. This ancient city we call El Paraiso Complex was known to have had at least 12 pyramids in it, and in 2013, real estate developers decided to begin scraping the land. They started with the largest pyramid, piled the remains up, and then torched them, setting them ablaze because, greed, I guess. Luckily, police came in and stopped them from continuing their handiwork, but we've talked about this before, right? This is part of the reason why we're in the dark, why we have no idea how old we were and what in the hell actually happened. It's part of the reason why we have amnesia. I also would like to bring up the fact that there are even older cities to the north and to the south of the Caral Supe cities. When you're doing your research, when it comes to South America, it's hard because so many times you will read an article and it's like, this is the oldest city. And then you'll read another one, this is the oldest city. It's because sometimes people are writing about excavated cities and sometimes they're writing about cities that weren't even excavated yet. They've just done preliminary work on testing of the surface level of stuff. Like maybe they found some textiles at the top, did some radiocarbon dating on it and realized that this is an extremely ancient city. But they know that they don't have the resources or the means to fully excavate it. So they don't want to dig any further because they're worried that they're going to damage the site even further. It totally makes sense what they're doing. It just makes your soul itch because you want to know so bad what's going on down there. You know what I mean? But it makes sense. I don't know if you guys know this, but recently they started doing something new and I think it's genius. Like they found this huge human-sized mask in Mexico. They dug it out. They cleaned it up. They repaired the mask, took a lot of pictures, made some casts of it, and then they completely buried it up again so that it didn't deteriorate in the conditions that are present now. Friggin' genius. Now we know it was there. We have exact duplicates, and they took many of them so they could send it out to different areas of the world so everyone can see the awesomeness that is there. And they buried the original so that when our civilization perishes and the next one comes up, someone's going to be like, holy crap, look at what I found. Anyway, I gotta stop getting sidetracked here. Back to the video. So looking at these pristine civilizations, some interesting coincidences come to the surface, right? Around the world, around the same time, agriculture shows up. Cities with oddly familiar architecture and layouts show up. Not only that, but when you look at what's being said, what was recorded orally in almost all these places, the same stories are being told. If you ask me, it's just too much of a coincidence, you know what I mean? Anyway, back to Caral Supe. Caral, one of the Caral Supe cities, was a pre-planned site. Based on the layout of the structures, the site appears to be designed with a social organization, a hierarchical social stratification in mind. Thus, it's represented in upper and lower portions of the city and the right-hand and left-hand portions of the city. Most of their cities consisted of large pyramid-like structures, sunken ceremonial plazas, amphitheaters, assorted temples, and housing. And when you're looking at these cities, it definitely seems like they try to keep them within a certain population size, right? I don't know what the size of this population was, but let's just say it's like between 5,000 and 10,000 people. And once it hits that max capacity, instead of adding to the city, they went further down the river valley. They built another one, almost like they were pods. And so no matter what direction you went in from one city to another, you were likely to hit another one. So they're set up so that if your pod city was here and you decided to go in a cardinal direction, you were likely to hit a very similar size city that was part of your civilization. And on top of that, none of their cities had defensive structures or mechanisms. There were no walls, there were no embankments, and there were no weapons, not at any one of the 32 known Caral Supe cities that we found yet. In their entirety of their run. Not at any point did they ever worry about fighting or war or skirmishes. And they were cities that weren't closed off to the rest of the area. They definitely had a vast network that they traded with too. They traded their beadwork, their cotton, fishing nets that they made with the cotton, their agriculture, musical instruments. It's very interesting when you look at it and you compare it to cities of other places in the world. This culture, they fished the bountiful Pacific Ocean. There's evidence that they had at least 14 domesticated plant species, including sweet potato, corn, cotton, and peppers. This is also the first place in the Americas where musical instruments seem to have been found. and figurines. In return, they imported stuff from other areas, including medicines, even hallucinogens from the Amazon. And speaking of figurines, look at this. Is that a South American Venus-like figurine? The hell are you doing here, lady? I'm just saying. It's weird, right? Sadly, though, it is thought that human sacrifice did occur here, but that's just another thing that seems to tie us together in ancient times. I don't know. It's like there seems in the most ancient of times to have been human sacrifice. It's bizarre. Multiple graves of young children were found beneath walls and floors, thought to be offerings to the long life of the building. Other offerings to the gods included textiles, beads, burnt seeds, and carved wood. In fact, the earliest representation of a god in all of the Americas comes from this place, well, that we have found so far. Do you recognize this guy? I'm sure you've seen him before. Here's another picture of him from a much later point in history. His name is Staff God, and believe it or not, you see him over and over throughout history of Meso and South America. But yeah, look at this guy. Here he is again. That's right, this is Staff God from Tiwanaku, Bolivia. He is also known as Viracocha by the even later Incans. Here's another depiction of him. In one hand, one staff. In the other hand, a staff that is split in two. Now, we obviously don't know what the Caral Supe say or thought about Staff God. So instead of going over Staff God, we're going to go over Viracocha, who came much, much later. But because of the intricacies of oral tradition, I'm hoping that he didn't change that much throughout history. Viracocha created the universe, the sun, the moon, the stars. He also created time and civilization itself. He made mankind by breathing into stones, but his first creation were brainless giants that displeased him. He destroyed them with a great flood and made a new, better one from smaller stones. Viracocha was worshipped as the god of the sun and storms. He was represented as wearing a sun for the crown, with thunderbolts in his hands and tears descending from his eyes as rain. In accord with the Inca cosmology, Viracocha may be assimilated to the planet Saturn, the god maker. Now, it is believed that he corresponds to this planet because it was a visible planet with the longest revolution around the sun, according to the Spaniards. I mean, we're going off of records left behind. Accounts recorded by Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa wrote that Viracocha was described as a man of medium height, white, and dressed in a white robe like an alb, secured around the waist, and that he carried a staff in one hand and a book in another. In one legend, he had a son named Inti and two daughters, Mama Kia and Pachamama. In this legend, he destroyed the people around Lake Titicaca with a great flood called the Unu Pachacuri. It lasted 60 days and 60 nights, saving two to bring civilization to the rest of the world. These two beings are called Manco Capac, which means splendid foundation, and Mama Uglu, which means mother fertility. These two individuals, the children, sometimes they are the children of Viracocha and sometimes they are the children of Inti, depending on which legend you look at, are the founders of the Inca civilization. Okay, we've covered advanced cities, complex institutions. What about the other prerequisites for civilization? Specialized workers, record keeping, and advanced technology. In the Caral Supe cities, the design of their cities show evidence for specialized workers. Their society was not so different from ours, right? An example of how their society may have looked or worked in regards to this may be like there are farmers growing cotton in the field. That cotton is harvested and brought to others in the city to weave fishing nets. Once the nets are done, a merchant gets the nets to the fishermen, and then these nets go into neighboring communities through trade, facilitating a network of cities and surrounding communities to work together. The cotton fishing nets are the advanced technology. I know sometimes it's hard for modern us to look at it and be like, what? But in reality, this was really a game changer for the Andean mountains. Before they used cotton for these fishing nets, they would make it out of another plant material. It was much harder to harvest. It was much harder to weave. So it took a lot more time and they didn't last near as long. Like they started to deteriorate almost immediately after getting into the water. So when they figured out how to use cotton for these nets, it was game over at that point in time. They really started to grow and expound from there. Now, let's go over record keeping. This, my friends, This is a quipu from the Inca Empire. I think what we can really extrapolate from the Caral Supe is that their traditions lasted a very long time. For thousands of years after they disappeared, all the things that they were doing continued on until the Inca show up, because this quipu right here, they found similar ones in Caral Supe. Now, the Inca people used them for collecting data and keeping records, monitoring tax obligations, census counting, calendar information, organization for basically anything you can think of. The cords stored numbers and numeric values encoded by knots, often in a base 10 positional system. A quipu could have only a few or 1,000 cords. Like, they could hold a vast amount of information. The configuration of the quipus make it so that endless information can be encoded in them. And not only the knots, the type of knots, where the knots are, but sometimes they would have different colors for the strings, would also have more information tied into that. I mean, it's pretty crazy interesting. So not only is this also, I would say, a form of record keeping, and many people say that this is a form of language. Like, you can say what you want, but there are many different kinds of knots used, and many think that it's very likely that certain types of knots used had the same meaning in many different places. So if you were in the city of Caral and you see this certain type of knot used with this certain color in this quipu, you know that it means 30 llamas. And then you go to another city 30, 40 miles away, you're reading another quipu and it has the same type of knot, the same position, same color. You know that they're also talking about their own 30 llamas over here. Anyway, I would say that that is definitely two things. I mean, the quipu could really be two things: advanced technology and record keeping. What's super crazy interesting, and another one of those wacky coincidences, is that they're not just an invention of the Americas. The ancient Chinese and the ancient native Hawaiians also used quipus to record information. So tell me, guys, seriously, like, what are the odds? What are the odds that independently all around the world, around the same time, cultures decide that they're going to build pyramids and cities that have similar functions, and then on top of that, they're going to record history and information in a strangely similar way? It's one hell of a crazy coincidence, am I right? Anyway, that's what I got for today. I hope you guys have yourselves a very great day.